One is the idea that there is some new thing, there's something new under the sun. Hey, have you heard? If you buy stocks on margin and sell them at full price, you can buy more stocks on margin and sell them at full price and get filthy rich. What could possibly go wrong? Second is the idea that the people promoting the new thing are true geniuses at creating wealth, or whatever it is of value that's the thing behind the thing. People suspend their natural suspicion and just jump right in. Then, when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong when there's a bubble, then comes the crash, when the bubble busts, and whatever the new thing was, and whatever the new ways of getting it, turn out not to have been sustainable. There's a bust, then there's doubt, then there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. People get mad at the ones they thought were so smart, the geniuses, for egging them on. There's finger pointing and accusations and recriminations. And if it was really bad, there are arrests and lawsuits, and families, businesses, and communities are torn apart. And there are suicides. Those things are behind every bubble and bust. They were behind the speculation and margin buying in the stock market that led to the crash of '29. They were behind the weird breeders' market for ostriches and emus in the early 90s that finally crashed, and it sent big birds loping loose across the countryside in some parts of the country, didn't it? They were behind the Beanie Baby bubble and bust in the late 90s. They were behind the dot-com bubble and bust and technology investment crash in '99 and 2000. And again, they were behind the housing bust and the housing bubble and the bust in 2007. And again, I think they have been behind church bubbles over the centuries, and it's why it's easy for us to feel so small, so little now. But do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So maybe you're thinking, bubbles in the church? How can that be? Isn't God's Spirit at work? Show me a bubble and a bust. Well, it all kind of got started with a bubble. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a colt to high acclaim. Remember? Palm Sunday? Crowds were shouting hosannas and hallelujahs. And by the end of that week, which we call Holy Week, he was all but deserted, with just a few women sticking with him to the bitter end. The male disciples were hiding and cowering in fear. And the hangers-on, the ones who were sure he was the political Messiah they were looking for, they were long gone. The camp followers who thought the disciples were geniuses, the half-hearted zealots who didn't dare personally try to throw off Roman rule, but they sure wanted to be around to enjoy the benefits when Jesus did. People who were suckered in by that misunderstanding of Jesus, they were gone. The Messiah bubble had bust. The Roman Emperor Constantine brought another bubble. After a few hundred years on the hems of existence, on the margins of a sect of Judaism, Christianity was declared the official religion of the empire. Suddenly it was cool to be Christian, and it was attractive because of the spoils of empire that spilled over into the church. What a bubble. And Constantine helped set down and institutionalize the perceived genius thinking of his day, and it lingers with us still. He and certain leaders of certain communities of Christian faith took what was mostly a way of life, a way of loving God and others, a life of hospitality and gracious giving and humble receiving, often very, very carefully when Roman soldiers were gunning for the Jesus people. Constantine and some bishops, they took a way of life and turned it into the first lists of things that they said people had to believe to be a Christian. We call them creeds. They were patterned after Roman soldiers' oaths. They're oaths to the empire. Oaths to empires of church and state have been easy to confuse ever since. What a bubble. And it's one that has never really burst. Here's another lesson from church history. This is really history. Ferdinand and Isabella brought another bubble in the late 1400s and the early 1500s. You know the King of Aragon and the Queen of Castile? We know that as Spain. And we know their most famous adventurer was Christopher Columbus. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, solidly in the tradition of Constantine, were riding a big bubble. See, they had just forcibly converted or banished all the Jews and Muslims from their lands. And they'd burned out the ones who tried to hide, all in the name of the church, and as incredible as it seems, in the name of Christ. The Catholic Church was at one of its weakest points, and a particularly weak pope had granted Ferdinand and Isabella special authority to find the so-called undiscovered countries. They deputized Columbus to lead the expeditions, so he did, in search of converts, but more so in the search of gold, to pay for more war, to seize Jerusalem, and to make it the seat of a new heaven and a new earth. We did not learn this in our school history books, but it's there. Columbus, like some Christians today, thought the end was near. And like some Christians today, he was doing all he could to hurry it up. The year 1500 was dead ahead. And people were freaking out over that, just like some people freaked out over the coming of year 2000. And like so many Christians today, Columbus confused the holy nature of what the church is supposed to be about. He confused that with worldly benefits, the benefits of a bubble. On February 15, 1493, Columbus reported this to his king and queen. He wrote, "So that, since our Redeemer has given the victory to our most illustrious king and queen, and to their renowned kingdoms in so great a matter, for this all Christendom ought to feel delight and make great feasts and give solemn thanks to the Holy Trinity." But thanks for what? "For," he wrote, "the turning of so many peoples to our holy faith, and afterwards for the temporal benefits, because not only Spain but all Christendom will have hence refreshment and gain." That, my friends, is a church bubble. And only in recent generations has it started to wheeze, as some of us rethink our supposed blessings and start to see them more as the spoils of war and colonialism. We can't turn back time, but we can be honest about it, in hopes of being able to tell the next time a big church bubble starts to rise.